The opposite of dragging around our moral anchor is to be morally consistent. But what does that look like? Let's talk about it. The shape and the image of how your heart is going to be what comes out of you and it affects your environment and people around you. Hello everyone, and welcome to another one of my videos. I'm sorry that I did not upload a video last week, as just on my end, the week was just way too busy. I had a lot going on with work and just other things to where it just was way too hard on me. So I just decided to take the week off and postpone until next week. So here we are once again, 2 weeks later. I try to be consistent as much as possible, but sometimes I just have to take that week off. So I hope you all understand. With that aside, I wanted to get back into a little bit what we talked about last time, which actually was 2 weeks ago now, which was the concept of our moral anchor and the concept of us dragging that around in our politics, right? And so reinforcing that, as you could probably tell from the intro, I wanted to come at it from a little bit different perspective, and that perspective being, rather than talking about the reality of dragging the moral anchor around and the consequences thereof, what does it look like to do the opposite of that? Because we talked about the bad of dragging around the moral anchor, but a lot of people shouldn't just be told what not to do, but they should be told what to do. That's usually how you go along through life. So what does it look like to not drag around our moral anchor? Well, to not have an anchor that's dragging around, as implies by the metaphor of the anchor, means to be morally consistent. And so this is what I wanted to get into today, is how do we become morally consistent? As quick as this video may be, I wanted to cover a very quick but very critical topic, or rather very important topic, or we'll call it a viewpoint. And that is how we can get ourselves to be morally consistent. The key answer to being morally consistent is to pay attention to where our heart is focused, or rather, some people may word it this way, where your heart lies, what your heart attaches to, where you invest your heart, so forth, these types of phrases. And so with that being said, first I wanted to depict the difference between our morals and our heart. And the reason I say this is because in order to be morally consistent, you have to see to it that your heart is viewing things the right way. And before I get too far into conversating about where our hearts are, I want to depict the difference between where our heart is and where our morals are. Because as I just said, you can see it, that you can consider it this way, that we can be morally consistent when we lay or attach our heart to the proper thing. But almost saying it that way almost sounds like I'm saying, okay, well now you're saying the heart is like an anchor. But Richard, I thought you said our morals are an anchor. Exactly. So I wanted to depict this metaphor in a way that's understandable very quickly, right? And that being that our morals, yes, are indeed the anchor. But I don't want us to see our heart as the anchor, as in it's what we're attached to, but rather I want you to see our heart as our eyes, because where our heart lies is where we're going to chase, right? Where our hearts are digging into is where we're going to follow. We're going to chase the desires of our heart, essentially, is what I'm saying. And the reason I use the metaphor of saying our morals are like an anchor is because our desires can always change. But again, going back to that conversation we talked about last time, when you have your morals, or rather your anchor, set up a certain way, there's going to be certain things that on the surface may seem pleasant, or in the end might seem like it might bring good benefits. But in order to get there, it requires some compromise on your morals. And so with having that moral anchor, it's planted, tied to something, or rather resting in its spot, to where it snags and keeps us from moving away from our morals. In other words, disables us, or rather restricts us from going beyond what we morally tolerate, even if our heart seems to desire, or rather maybe our eyes think it looks desirable. So I want us to view our heart not as the anchor. Again, our morals are the anchor. That's what keeps us rooted and grounded. But rather, the heart is like the eyes, where you're looking. And the reason I say this is because, again, I touched on this a little bit last time, but just I want to re-emphasize it a little bit, re-illustrate it, is that where you find your heart, or where you find value in things, right? How you define things in your heart, what you value, what you come to value in your life, in your reality, is going to depict how you center your world. And so that being said, when it comes into politics, again, I know I explained this briefly last time, but I'm adding on now the heart icing, if you will, on top of the cake. So with the conversation of our morals and in the conversation of politics, how there's a lot of votes, there's a lot of elections, there's a lot of promotion and so forth, agendas and such to bring about things, to stop things, to encourage things that to some, in some degree, may seem good. It morally at times causes us to question whether or not it's good or wrong. And so this is where we need to understand the difference between our sense of morality and our sense of what we treasure, or rather where our heart is. And the reason I say that is because there's times to where they're not always aligned. A anchor can't tug you unless you're moving away from it, or like the analogy I gave last time, the leash of a dog doesn't snag unless the dog is running away, right? Now, if you discipline yourself properly, you shouldn't have to feel that tug, but nevertheless, the morals are still there for a reason, because there's times, right? Not everything that's bad or evil comes off as evil, right? For that being said, let's have the conversation of the topic of sex, right? Obviously, sex is a very pleasing experience. It's a very tempting experience, right? And so if we just went off of the concept or reality that it feels good or that it's pleasurable and so forth, that means in all circumstances, sex is good. Well, then you have to start questioning, well, does this mean if I'm married and I have sex outside of my marriage, but it still feels good, right? But now you see where it contradicts the moral, okay? So bringing it out of that very easy to understand example, as cliche as it may be, coming back into the simplistic conversation of politics, or rather ambiguous conversation of politics, when we have certain bills, certain votes, certain elections, certain stances we can take or make, there's going to be times where things may seem like, oh yeah, this is great, it feels good. But at the end of it, you have to, or rather at its core, you have to analyze how this lines up with your morals. Because if it causes you to cross your morals, again, you should never align with it. I'm not meaning to restate my entire previous video, but again, I'm trying to add on to it. Because again, last time we covered the conversation of the negative effects of doing this and how we shouldn't do this. But bringing it into this video, we're talking about how to not do that. But in order to do that, I wanted to depict the difference of how your morals, being how you define good and evil, are different from where your heart lies, right? In other words, to what you love. Because you can love what is evil, or you can love what is good. You can hate what is evil, or you can hate what is good. But the feeling of love and hate is not the moral. The feeling of love and hate is the heart, it's the emotion. The moral is the definition of good and evil. So hopefully that explains it good enough to where we can take this understanding and move forward with it, okay? So we see the difference between the moral anchor and the heart, which again, at least for now, I say we could consider as our eyes, right? Where we're looking, or rather where we're holding our values. If you want to think of it as a treasure chest, where you treasure things, or how you treasure. Let's think of the heart as in this manner, okay? So with that being said, I wanted to give a very clear example here that's very layered and paints the picture very clearly what I'm bringing across, okay? And that is to start off the conversation of pro-choice. Now, obviously, I already mentioned a little bit about the conversation of sex, right? Meaning, oh, it's very good feeling, right? So that means it's good, right? Well, not necessarily, not if it goes against morality, right? If you had a normal, most common sense of reality, which a lot of people define as being bad, cheating is being bad. If you cheat on your husband, cheat on your wife, right? You can't just go with what feels good. But aside from that, you also have a lot of this going on outside of marriage. And while I personally don't agree with it, being a biblical man, I believe that the act of sex is reserved for the relationship of a marriage. You still have people who, whether married or not married, because married people have this viewpoint as well. A lot of people are in agreement with pro-choice. And essentially what pro-choice is, as most of us I'm sure are aware, is the choice that, or rather the statement that a woman should have the choice to abort her baby if she wants to, with the claims or defense, her body, her choice, hence the terminology or the classification of pro-choice. And while that sounds good to an extent, and I'm not going to get into the complete conversation about it, I wanted to very quickly depict the difference, the reality of it that people don't really discuss. Because while, yes, you're claiming you have the choice to do with your body, what you're neglecting is the fact that there's another human being in there. And I think I even mentioned this in my previous video as well, that when something else is in your body that has DNA that's separate from yours, then it's no longer your body. You are offing another body or another human being. And so with that being said, this whole conversation of pro-choice, right? People pose it as a symbol of healthcare, meaning that, there's people who are in unfortunate circumstances where they're forced upon and they have undesired circumstances, so forth, abusers and assaulters and so forth. And so this is a way for them to eradicate that, which again, those circumstances are very tough and very hard. But again, at its core, what it's neglecting to acknowledge is while those situations are bad, your band-aid, or rather your solution to that, is still the offing of a human being that has their own separate DNA. So while I don't disagree that those circumstances are hard, I'm in agreement that those are very tragic. What I can agree on is the solution to fix it, doing one wrong thing to fix another wrong thing, right? But again, that's beside the point. I'm not trying to get too distracted onto a different tangent, right? I want to stay focused to this conversation. Bringing this out, and why I'm saying this, is because the conversation of pro-choice, really, if you bring it down to what it really is, because that argument that people make is very minute to what reality is. When you do the numbers and look at the statistics, the percent of people that even fall in that range of why they use abortion is maybe 1%. Okay, it's very small. And so majority of people who defend and are using abortion is because they want to have sex, but they don't want to acknowledge the consequences thereof. In other words, when you really get down to it, the reality of pro-choice is saying that you're pro-sex at any cost, even at the offing of your own children. That's what pro-choice is. Now, people don't say it that way. Why? Because it sounds very bad to acknowledge you want to end a human being, right? And this is why I'm bringing in the conversation not only of the anchor, because it's going to be involved in this, but also the heart. And I'm gonna try to break this down as quickly as possible with coming from both perspectives, right? Because you have the dragging of the anchor of your morals to allow yourself to be put in this situation. But the reason you drug your anchor anyways is because your anchor was trying to keep up with your heart. And this is the point I'm getting at. Where your heart lied is you think sex is so fun to where you're willing to do it at any cost, even if that means offing the life of an innocent human being just so you could keep having pleasure and again not have the consequences thereof. And the reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people would acknowledge that killing innocent people is wrong, yet they claim that pro-choice, to be against pro-choice, is evil. Why? At the core, they still like to have their fun. So their heart is what's pulling them towards this. They want to have, and of course they want to have fun, they want to do all these things, but they don't want the consequence. But because morality says a consequence is going to happen, a baby's going to come, so now you have to live your life according to this, but they don't want a baby, or rather they can't afford a baby, or maybe they're in college and it'll be too stressful. And instead of being a responsible individual, or rather responsible human being or adult like they're supposed to be, instead they adjust their morals, they drag their anchor and say, oh, this isn't a baby, it's a clump of cells. Well, by that definition, every human being is a clump of cells because that's what we're made of, right? But again, and I'm not trying to break it all down in this video, but when you break down the science of it, when you break down biology, there is no arguing about it that at the moment of conception, life happens. So any argument you make, as bad as the situations may be that you come up with, what you're justifying in saying pro-choice is you're saying it's okay to off another human being. And that is never the case. As much as your heart goes towards the people in those bad situations, you need to have that same heart for the people that don't have a voice, that get ended by their own mothers or fathers, right? Because the moment you ignore the living being there, you are dragging your morals. And I'll paint this picture very clearly here because of why this involves dragging the anchor. Because just very quickly, I'll make this point. I watched a video. It was a video I seen on Instagram where a man put on some little fake cosplay ears and put on some fake piercings so he could play a part that would make him be more received. Because as he was walking, he saw a bumper sticker on a car that said, "Abortion is healthcare." So going along with this, he decided to test the person who had this bumper sticker in a comedic way, but to test their logic, right? So he comes and he knocks on the door and he performs a skit for him, essentially, because again, it's social media. He's creating content. He's making a point, but also making content. And so what he's doing is he's playing the part like he's going door to door asking for contributions to help animals, or rather to help healthcare, fund healthcare for animals, or rather for puppies. And the woman who answers the door seems very interested. And but still, he says, "Well, would you like to know where your money would be going, before you sign?" She's like, "Oh yeah, that would help." And so he goes into explaining his little made-up skit of why he's asking for donations. And the reason he's asking for donations, he claims, is because of health care for these puppies. And then he goes into further elaboration, pointing out that the funds will be going to help pay for or finance the abortions of unwanted puppies. And the woman goes, "Whoa, wait, what?" He said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, see, what's going on is," paraphrasing my own words, he says, "What's going on is that the puppies are being birthed at too fast of a rate to where, honestly, the shelter doesn't have the money or the finances to support them. It's basically puppies birthing puppies. And so what we're trying to do is raise funds to help with puppy health care, to help abort the unwanted puppies." And the immediate change in the woman's tone is like, "Oh no, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that." And then almost as if he was offended by it, he points back, he says, "Well, that was your car. That's your car, isn't it? That has the bumper sticker, 'Abortion is healthcare.'" She says, "Well, yeah." And then almost as if he's offended, still playing a part, he says, "Well, then you understand that abortion is healthcare, right?" And then she gets offended and says, "Well, yeah, but that bumper sticker isn't about puppies." And he said, "Well, what's it about?" She said, "It's about people." And then he gets offended. He says, "So are you saying that people aren't as unborn people in the womb aren't as valuable as unborn puppies in the womb?" And she goes, you know. And he says, "Well, so then you understand that, they're equal in life. So if you shouldn't abort the one, you shouldn't abort the other, right?" And she starts stuttering. And it, again, if I had the time to play the video, I would. I might edit it in here somehow. But long story short, she gets so tripped up at words until she realizes he's not really in the same agreement of mindset she is, to where without anything else to say, she ends the conversation and tries to shut the door, slams the door in his face. But that being the point, what I'm bringing across is that this woman had an ideology, a mental mindset that abortion is healthcare because of what politicians say, because of what media says, right? Because of people in unforeseen circumstances, right? Because of, this assault or so forth, or the propagated lie that has been medically disproven now in nowadays scientific technology that, it could end the, mother's life and so forth, when science and doctors have come out and said, no, that's not the case, that it's not needed to save the mother's life. But again, I'm not trying to paint every side story here. I'm trying to stay focused. You want to do the research, look it up yourself. If you dare to, comment in my video. I'll reply to it. I just can't do it here. I'm on a time basis. But that being said, with all these circumstances, people form this ideology just like this woman had, that abortion is healthcare. So then when a man comes and tests that mindset to see if it's consistent, he applies that same mindset of our babies to dog babies or puppies. And when the woman sees that same value, that same treasure, but outside of the justified circumstance, all of a sudden she now sees the evil. Why? Because it's still the same value. It's still the same moral, just different viewpoint. So again, this is what I'm saying. She still had the moral to not end something so innocent, but she drugged that moral for the sake of being with what is woke culture, or what is politically considered correct. Or maybe it's because she wants to have good times herself. I don't know. That's not the point. What the point is, this is how inwardly people take their morals and they redefine them so they can align with things politically how they want to. They can align with things financially how they want to. And any other avenue to where they can get the things they want to, they can experience things they want to, they can live the life they want to without feeling like they themselves are evil. So in other words, instead of seeing to it that they're not evil and learning to value what's morally good, or rather to treasure what's morally good, they redefine what good is, so good aligns with what they treasure. And this is the problem. And why I'm bringing this out is because, again, I'm not trying to re-explain or re-talk my entire previous video, but as the damages have been explained inwardly and outwardly of how dragging our morals can affect everything, right? Inwardly and outwardly, ourselves and our atmosphere, or rather our environment. Aside from that conversation, getting into how we avoid that, you have to look at the heart, because how the heart values things is going to depict whether or not you stay with your anchor or whether you don't. So in other words, not only do you have to have a good sense of morality, you also have to see to it that your heart lies in the proper place. Now, to go along with this, I do have a couple scriptures. As always, I'm a biblical man. And for those, especially those who are coming from biblical backgrounds, I like to bring things to a biblical sense for you all, but also just because I hold my values to a biblical sense, right? Not that I preach only the Bible, but to show how commonly accepted values can tie to the biblical scripts. Why? Because a lot of it comes from it, right? So I wanted to bring this up here. So this is the first verse I wanted to read for you all, okay? So this comes out of the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 21. And it says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." This is the reason why I explained it as I did, saying, looking at your heart, explaining it as if to say, where do you put your treasure, or how do you treasure things? Where is your treasure? Because the essence, you think of a treasure as in a pirate's treasure, right? Something they hold very dearly, right? Or value very dearly, even with their life, right? So you can look at it from that sense. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So your heart lies with what you treasure. So again, if you treasure having sex, then what you're going to do with your anchor is drag it to where you can always do what you want to do. But here's where we have to redefine. It's not looking where your anchor is that's going to keep consistency. It's looking where your heart is. Because if instead of having a heart that focuses only on sex, if you have a heart that focuses on life, meaning you value what life is, then guess what? When you're married, then you're going to value so much life that you're, in the proper sense, you're going to want to, guess what? Procreate. Then when you procreate, then you're going to understand in even more of a sense the value of life when you have an offspring of your own, right? And this all comes from a value of, or rather from an essence of valuing life, treasuring life. You can still have the fun, but the heart is more aligned in a proper place. Think of it like a back, right? You can have a person be like this, or you can have a person be like this. Both are standing up, but it's not what direction they are, it's how they're aligned, right? You can have the same action you're doing, but if the heart isn't in the right place, it's like you're not aligned. Things are off, and it's going to lead to some crooked things. Meaning you're going to have situations like that example I gave you, where one circumstance you seem right, but then another circumstance it's not. Again, that's called dragging our anchor. But getting back to the heart here, I want to focus on this and then go into another verse. Okay, so rereading this again, book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So we see even the Bible refers to our heart in this sense, as if to say, where our treasure is, our heart's going to be, right? So with that being said, I wanted to bring up a second verse from the Bible here, okay? So this comes out of the same book, the book of Matthew, except this is chapter 12, verse 35, okay? And what this scripture says is, it says, "The good person brings good things out of his" what? "Good treasury. But the evil person brings evil things out of his evil treasury." So again, you have Matthew 6:21 saying, "For where the treasure is, there your heart will be also." So where your heart is where you treasure things, right? So you see the association between heart and treasure. And then you go a little bit further in the book, and then you see here it depicts the good person brings good things out of his good treasure, while the evil person brings evil things out of his evil treasure. So again, with how your treasure is, whether it's a good treasure or evil treasure, whether you love things in a good way or love things in an evil way, The shape and the image of how your heart is going to be what comes out of you and it affects your environment and people around you. And this is a point I'm trying to get. And this is why I'm trying to bring it back to the concept of our heart. Yes, we need to have an anchor and acknowledge our morals as an anchor so that it keeps us from going too far. But we can't just look at that picture halfway. We have to also acknowledge the heart, because if our heart is not in the right place, best believe we will drag that anchor all day long. And we'll find ourselves in a very similar situation as the example I gave, where we feel so justified to where we're ready and willing to fight and stand up and argue with people day and night. No, this is right, you're wrong. Until logic comes into the situation and shows where we were off. And then we realize how crooked our viewpoint really was. And I'm not saying this to beat anyone up, but I'm saying this to bring alignment and to see to it that we all, again, think clearly, critically, and think the right way. Again, this is a message that comes out of love, but it's also a message of correction. Because when we stand for things that are evil, we affect the world that's around us. When we value things that are evil, that evilness comes out. Okay, and I'm sorry if I'm getting a little emotional here, but these are things I hold very dear to me, okay? So I thank everyone for tuning in to this video, but that's where I'll end it for this one. So love you all. God bless you. We'll see you next time.